welcome to SPAR's Better and Better podcast. I am Kristen Parker, the Education Director here at SPAR, and I'm going to be hosting this lovely conversation with Cindy Allen from Bay Equity and Kevin Harris from Wells Fargo. Home mortgage, right?
Yes.
All right. So today's conversation is going to be really about some down payment assistance programs, because I think there's a lot of them out there that nobody knows about.
True thing.
Right? So ultimately, our goal is what can we educate our realtor members to educate our clients out in the public, right? Because that's get those people to you. So how can we help our members help you help them?
Right.
Big circle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of just dive right in there. Got any lesser known programs you want to talk about?
Oh, I got a whole
You got a
list.
whole list. Okay.
Yes. There's a plethora.
Okay.
There is a plethora.
Because the known ones are everybody knows Minnesota Housing, Startup, Step Up. Those are known, right?
Yes.
Okay. And SPAR's jurisdiction spans rural and metro. So maybe let's start with a rural. What do you got
Sure.
out in the greater Minnesota area?
Well, the USDA program is an amazing program. I think in a lot of ways it's underutilized. What's really great about USDA is you can go up to 100% of the value. And you can actually a lot of times go over 100% of the value if the property can support that value. So you can roll your closing costs into the loan. It can be a little bit tricky when it comes to qualifying. There are very specific income guidelines. The property has to be in a designated USDA area to qualify. But the USDA has an amazing website where you can plug in the address of the property. You can plug in the income information and really see if a person qualifies. It's what lenders use, and individuals can use that website as well.
Oh, excellent. So they can kind of do the homework themselves to start off.
If they want to, right? Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Well, that is awesome.
Well, and I think a misconception can be that it's rural housing is a kind of a hobby farm, more of a farming type situation, where it's residential small town.
Okay, so
Right.
that is
Yeah.
probably a big myth.
Right. It's
Yeah.
a big myth. You can't have income producing property with any of these programs.
Correct.
Any standard lending, that would be a farm loan then.
Sure.
But if we suggest if you find a property that has a bunch of outbuildings or something like that, let us know and send some pictures and we'll get it checked out with underwriting ahead of time to make sure that it's going to fit into the property profile.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
if-
you can have small acreage, but there's most of the value has to be in the house.
Okay, well, that's excellent because I also thought USDA was going to be like hobby farm.
Yeah, right.
Sounds more like my dad could have used this program
Right.
out in Bryceland, out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And we could put the link to the USDA website on SPAR's website.
Yeah.
And people could investigate it more themselves. It's really neat when you plug in an address and it really tells you yes it does qualify or no it doesn't, and then it's a matter of getting the income to qualify.
Sure. Well, that's
Well,
excellent. We'll
And
put that
another
in
thing
there.
is, it's surprising. It was only a few years ago Hudson, Wisconsin was eligible.
Really?
So yeah, you don't really, some communities, it's not there anymore, of
Sure.
course, because now it's a city. But you'd be surprised some of the areas where you actually can use this program, which are surprising.
You don't have to go too far out of that metro loop to
Yeah,
maybe
right.
use it. That's
it's
excellent.
It's good to just, if you're going to list something, I don't know, in the third ring suburbs, it doesn't hurt to put the address in and see if you can use that for your seller to attract more buyers.
Oh, that is excellent. Excellent. So beyond the USDA, are there any other sort of programs that come to mind that maybe our members and their clients might use? We span from Pine County in the north down to Goodhue in the south. So anything else?
I would like to make a big plug. I know it's very obvious, but don't forget about VA. VA is one of the more underutilized programs as well. I'm a veteran. I'm an 8-year Army veteran. I didn't go to any conflicts or anything, but I did serve. But I have a strong affinity to helping to support the veteran community. And the one thing you'll know about vets is they're very humble, and they won't always acknowledge maybe that they could qualify when they could. So I encourage realtors to ask and inquire, are you a veteran? And of course, if they are, thank them for their service and ask them, have they inquired about their VA eligibility? Because the VA loan program, pound for pound, is one of the best loan programs available. If you're a disabled veteran, you might not have to pay property taxes, or a very limited amount of property taxes. Usually your VA disability needs to be at a higher level for that to happen. But you can do zero down. You never have PMI. You get a better rate than most people. So whenever we're looking at potential buyers, always check that VA box and see, do they qualify, or are they a veteran? And if they are a veteran, what's their eligibility?
Well, and the other piece of that puzzle too with VA is it's the easiest loan to qualify for, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
I would.
Yeah, they give the most room for bankruptcy, foreclosure, short sales, credit, job stability kind of things.
Yeah.
Very, very liberal.
Absolutely. And there seems to be almost a I don't know if stigma is the right word, but with realtors, I feel like sometimes I've seen realtors try to get buyers to not use their VA because there's some misconceptions with VA, right? Some things that make people be like, ooh, I don't know if you should do that. And some of them can be valid. Some of the biggest issues sometimes that come up with VA is the condition of the property, right?
Sure.
The property does need to be in good condition. If there's flaking paint, rotting wood, things that might be a hazard, it reminds me a little bit like FHA, but the premise behind it is they don't want a veteran to get into a property that's dilapidated, and they have to put money into it that they don't have. But that doesn't mean that veteran should not have the opportunity to use that benefit. And I've seen it where I did a VA loan just recently. The property did need some work, but that veteran actually put that work in because the seller didn't want to do it. And he was like, hey, you know what? It's small enough and easy enough for me to be able to put a little bit of work into it to get it so that it'll pass the appraisal. And he did that. And he was able to get into that house with zero down, no PMI, and an amazing rate. So, so just have those conversations and never, ever discourage a veteran from using their VA benefits that they've earned.
Absolutely. And so it's definitely an education piece. So it's not a lesser type of financing.
Correct.
It's just as good as all the rest.
Well, and then you can use MHFA throughout the state, and they always have money. And then if you do business over in Wisconsin, they have a similar program called WIDA. So, yeah, that's what's nice about those programs is they never run out of funds.
Sure. I wish I could say the same.
If our pocketbooks were the same, right?
So what do you guys think about some city programs? Are there particular cities trying to encourage folks to move in, offering
bunch.
some down payment assistance? What do you
want me to
got?
just give it like
you've
an
got
overview?
like a list.
I do. So Bloomington has 10.5, which is forgivable if you live there until January 2027. So that is free money, and you don't have to be a first-time home buyer to use that. That's one thing to remember, too. There's a lot of these programs that don't require first-time home buyer status. So that's something that I think people don't generally think about. Shoreview has up to $30,000 depending on your income. Sales price max is $425,000, and Bloomington has no sales price max. Come Home to Edina, 25% of the sales price up to $60,000. You don't have to be a first-time home buyer for that, but if you are a first-generation home buyer, they have an extra $15,000 forgiven.
Wow.
That part of it will be forgiven at $1,000 a year. Woodbury has a program. let's see, what else have we got? Yeah, as far as city programs go, and then there is a near North Willard Hay neighborhood program, 10,000 forgiven after 7 years, and don't have to be a first-time home buyer. So they all have.
Richfield.
Yeah,
I have Richfield I'm always very intrigued by these programs where you get more than 20,000, right? What I love about Minnesota housing is very straightforward. They're really my gold standard, because when it comes to easiness and convenience, what I love about Minnesota housing is it's not city specific. You can go anywhere in the state and be able to get those funds. Sometimes where it's tricky for lenders is you have a pre-approval come in and they're like, oh yeah, I want to get this money, but they maybe don't want to specifically live in that particular city. So as long as you know that you're committed to a particular city, it can be great. But it can also be, there's time that needs to be put into to get through underwriting and qualify. And so if you go through all that process and then you find another property in another city, that's a lot of time lost. But if you know that you do want to live in some of these particular cities, Plymouth, Richfield, Shoreview, St. Louis Park, Woodbury, Edina, there's some really, really good programs out there to help you qualify if you meet the income requirements, first generation requirements, which, is going to be you'll be hearing more of that word in the coming months. First generation home buying is going to be a bigger deal, I think, in our state to close this home ownership gap
Absolutely.
that we're seeing in the nation.
Another thing to remember with these programs, not so much MHFA, but these different city programs and such, they all have different guidelines, different rules, weird little things, so you need more time. It's not going to be a 3-week closing. We've probably got to have 45 days because by the time we get done with our piece of it, then we have to send the rest. But I will say there are some of these programs that allow a pre-approval for the money.
No.
So, we might want to get that income looked at ahead of time, and some of them you can even make a reservation, and you don't have to have a property in mind, and you have 60 days. I think another one of them is 6 months to find a property. So, with the Ramsey County outside of the city of St. Paul, their first-time home buyer is $20,000, but then they also have a first-generation piece of it, 25% of the sales price, up to $93,150.
Wow.
So, and that's forgiven at 5% a year. So, if they live there for 15 years, that's a lot of free money.
That sure is.
Yep. The sales price limit is $372,600 on that one. And then the Rondo, that's a interesting program because it's got 4 different levels of assistance. So $40,000 is the initial, and if you're first generation, you get an extra 10.
Okay.
Now, if you qualify for the inheritance fund, which I think the Rondo Trust has record of who lost their ancestors that lost their property. So if you qualify for that, that one is an extra $50,000, and if you buy in Rondo, it's an extra 10. So
Wow.
you can get $110,000 if forgiven at 1/15th per year.
That is an amazing assistance to help bridge that gap.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
only the first generation has to be first-time home buyer. The rest of it is available to
Wow.
move-up buyers too. So yeah, those two, the Ramsey. Oh, and the Ramsey County. Did we talk about that yet? That one is anything outside the city of St. Paul.
Okay.
So White Bear Lake, Shoreview, Mounds View, anything in Ramsey County. We did talk about that. That's the one that's a 93,150.
Yeah, 93.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, there's just a ton of.
There's a ton of,
things.
and I mean, pound for pound, Minnesota, Twin Cities area has some of the best down payment assistance in the nation. I work with loans all over the state, and I see different programs, and we just have so many programs to help such a wide group of people that we're truly lucky in that way. But we need it because the housing disparity in our state is it almost can bring you to tears sometimes, like that only 25% of people of color own property in our state. Alabama's better than us. Like, come on. Like, no offense to Alabama.
We've got some work to do.
We got some work to
That's
do.
right.
But with all of these programs, though, hopefully together it will help close this disparity and just make it more of an equal playing field.
Well, and I think that this is unusual times. It's when housing market gets tough. We see these programs come out,
Yep.
and they're not always available. So it's really it's a good thing to talk about
So
because
the programs are here to sort of stimulate that economy and that let's
I
get
don't-
back to housing and
I don't think I've seen anything forgivable in probably 20 years.
okay.
So this is really MHFA. We've always used that, but these types of programs with the first generation forgivable, don't have to be a first time home buyer. I haven't seen anything like that in a long, long time.
There was the one I'm just having the $15,000 grant last year that was a big housing one too. Anytime that you can get a grant where it's forgivable, it is very special. So it's just a matter of, I think the key for a lot of realtors is you don't have to know every program out there, but if you can get with quality mortgage consultants that have been in the business a while, they work in that space and they're comfortable in that space, they will help you and your buyers understand their options the best.
Certainly.
So as a realtor, you can focus on selling homes and finding properties, but put together a team of lenders that work in and specialize in different down payment assistance, closing cost credits, know those niche programs inside and out so that you can bring your buyers to them when it looks like it's a good fit.
Absolutely. So for the realtor side of it, we don't need to know all the ins and outs of all the qualifying factors, but be educated enough to know there are these programs out there that if you happen to have a client that says to you, yeah, well, I don't have this, or I can't qualify, or I don't have that much money, or that, or the other. Have enough knowledge to know that there's these programs and some lenders that you can pair them with to help them. Because if you know that there's all this money out there, there's the potential is greater that the client just doesn't know that.
Well, and I
you're
think
kind of
too,
bridging
this is just a twofold good thing because it really helps the community and it gives all of us something to talk about.
Yeah.
People are scared. They're sitting on the sidelines. They don't know if they should buy now. And even if they don't use any of this, you're an expert. You know, like you say, you don't have to be an expert, but you have knowledge of what's going on around you. You know, you come across as a competent, good realtor, and it might get people excited again.
Yeah.
It should. I just can't believe that this money isn't flying off the shelves. It's. I don't know about you, but I've heard there's just not a lot of
Movement. I've heard the same.
use. You know, people aren't using it.
So, well, a lot of these, especially the city specific programs, a lot of them are underutilized. Number one, sometimes the messaging just isn't out there.
Yeah.
You're not going to see a lot of advertising or radio ads or television ads about these. So a lot of it is just ignorance. People just don't know that they're
Right.
there. And number two, they don't know how they work, or they don't know where to start to find out how they can even get access to it.
Right.
And I don't know what all the answers are to solving those issues, but I do think that again, that's why it's so important to, as a consumer, we want to encourage them to ask questions. For them to do a little bit of homework. Where do you want to live?
Yep.
Do you understand some of these options that are out there so that when they do sit down with their mortgage officer or their mortgage consultant, they can ask some questions to see if they are even versed with some of the programs? Because not every mortgage consultant works with down payment assistance,
Right.
closing cost credits, things like that. So you just want to know, what type of consultant you're working with.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about some assistance. Now, let me just clarify. If I qualify for one of these city programs, that's the only bucket of money. You can't then also go and use Minnesota Housing, or can you?
Well, you can.
Okay.
With some of these programs, but some of them don't allow it. So we just have to be really careful about making sure that we've got all
Sure.
the T's crossed and I's dotted, because there are ways to get hung up on this stuff.
Right.
But don't be afraid of it. It's just they all have little things that we have to be aware of and be careful of, but that's our job to make
Yep,
sure that we've
yep.
got that covered.
Yep. Using it as down payment or using it towards closing costs.
Yes, that's
that
can
kind of
be a
thing.
misconception.
They call it layering,
Yeah.
where you can stack different programs together, and it just
Really?
depends on the program, and some will allow it and some won't.
Okay.
Yeah, and more time. That's
more
really
time.
that's really a lot of work to put one of those together.
It really,
Okay.
it
Yeah.
really is. It can make your brain hurt sometimes when you're dealing with the
Oh my
the
gosh,
layering.
I know. It's
Ooh, but,
it's complex, but don't be afraid.
Right,
Yeah.
That's our
exactly.
job.
Right, exactly.
Find a good one.
Yes, that's
Let them
right.
help you. Let them
Yeah.
help get in a house. Okay.
Right.
All right. So you mentioned one Minneapolis neighborhood. Are there, so Minneapolis and St. Paul have obviously some niche neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some special things we need to know about some neighborhood financing?
Well, before I forget, there is also a lot of fix-up money
Oh,
available in different neighborhoods. So that triggered me to think about that. So if you have someone who's going to buy a home that might be a little bit rough and they don't have any money to fix it afterwards, depending on the community, I was surprised to learn that as well, that there is, because we don't usually, after they move in, unless they call us and ask. But that's another thing to check into.
excellent.
Right.
Yeah, especially if people are open to, like the north side and things like that. A lot of communities are trying to take some of these properties that might be a little bit beat up and get quality homeowners in there to revitalize the community. Because the best way to revitalize a community is to get homeowners in those communities that care and love it. And so a lot of communities have money set aside to help homeowners, do that type of fixing up.
Okay.
Oh, and the other thing I should mention too, before I forget, is many of these programs allow multifamily also. So some of them will allow a duplex. There are just a couple that will go 3 to 4 units. And then you also, in addition, most of them also require you to take the education piece of it. And some of them, even though you're going to do the home stretch, you're also going to have an hour-long conversation with a counselor. And then you also go through landlord training if you're buying a multifamily. So there's a lot of good things that, can help people be less afraid.
Sure. So that's good news, because I think about several different communities that are looking for that multi-generational housing.
Yeah, exactly.
So that would come in handy there.
Well, and a lot of people don't know, just even on a regular program with FHA, you can buy a 4-unit with 3.5% down, as long as you're going to live in one unit.
Right.
And there's a different qualifying, we have to do the property cash flow analysis and all that. But boy, oh boy, that's the way I started out. My dad's a realtor. I bought a 3-unit, and then we lived there for a couple of years, and then we bought another 3-unit and rented it out. So the opportunities are endless, right, guys?
You're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. But looking at like multi-units as a first-time home can be sometimes a good option. If you can support that payment, it can be a great way to start to build up your real estate portfolio.
Absolutely.
You live in it. You live in one of the units for a couple of years, and then you move out, buy another property, and convert the first one into more of an investment property. So it can be a great way to just diversify your portfolio as a homeowner.
Lots of tax write-offs.
Lots of tax write-offs. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're not just bridging the gap. We're now building wealth.
Yes.
Good
Generational
point.
wealth.
Excellent.
Wow,
Excellent.
that was deep. I like that.
Well, I try, Cindy.
Yes, good job. Great work.
A little nuggets here and there. So I heard Ramsey County. Are there any other counties that we should talk about?
I guess not off the top of my head.
Okay.
Dakota County hasn't had money for a long time. Those are kind of the neighborhoods that I'm aware of. Do you know anything about Anoka?
I don't know anything about Anoka. I was going to. There is a program. Wells Fargo does have an excellent up to $5,000 closing cost credit.
Okay, what is that?
So it's if the house is for a primary residence in the Twin Cities market, they can get an up to $5,000 closing cost credit that they don't have to pay back. It comes with lower PMI, and it also comes with a better rate. So it was actually designed to help close the home ownership gap. They're required to complete a home buyer education, but it's very straightforward. They can make up to $94,000 or less and qualify, and that amount seems to be going up year after year. It's based on a 80% median income calculation, but I've really liked that program. It's just made it very easy and straightforward for people that might already have money to put down for down payment and closing costs. It just allows them to bring less money and to make that payment more affordable. And that can be used in all of the 11 county metro area.
And something comes to mind that I think we just need to sort of throw out there.
Okay.
Asking for down payment assistance doesn't mean that you're going to struggle to make your own payment. It doesn't mean that you're, cash poor.
Thank you for bringing that
What
up.
you really are doing is asking for money to put down, free money, as
Yeah, a lot
Cindy
of
so
it's
puts
free.
it,
Yeah.
free money to use to get into this house that then you keep your cash for those first 6 months that you need to buy paint, you need to buy furniture, whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's free.
Well, yes. Not all
most
of it is free.
most of it
Forgivable, probably a better
forgivable.
word.
Most of
Yeah.
it, we just want to be clear. Most assistance does have to be repaid,
Sure.
Unless it's a grant where it's forgiven after a period of time. But even the ones that have to be paid back, that's what keeps those programs solvent, right? I mean, I think of when it's actually a good thing that a lot of our programs do need to be repaid, because that just makes it easier for the next person to have access to those funds when they need it. Yeah, but it's really understanding those little nuances can be amazing. And I did want to make another little plug of an amazing program that focuses on union workers. There's this amazing program called Union Plus, where buyers can get a $500 gift card after they close, and if they're a veteran, they can get an extra $1,000 gift card. So that's a program that I work with. Where I'm at, and it's just another way to give back to union workers. Union workers can be extremely brand loyal, and so whenever I can offer that, it just it's another feather in the cap, because they like to be acknowledged, and just another way to help those hardworking union workers out there.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing that one. Yeah, so I think it's just important that we remind people that down payment assistance is not a bad thing.
It's really not.
Really, everybody should just ask.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah.
You don't have
got
to,
any
you don't
money
have to
I
use
can
it.
get?
Right.
Exactly.
I really do like the fact that they changed the purchase agreement so you don't have to acknowledge whether or not a person is getting down payment
Yes.
assistance,
Yeah,
because it can
that's
be a
good.
stigma.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I
It
mean?
is.
And sometimes they're more scrutinized and have a deeper underwriting, sometimes on the front end, than a lot of other programs do. So just because they're using down payment assistance does not make them a
Lesser of a buyer.
lesser of a buyer.
That's right.
Yeah, good point, Kevin. That's important.
At the end of the day, the seller's net's still going to get there, right?
Right, it's right, exactly.
That's all we should care
Which is why I've always thought that what's the issue with it? Because the seller is still getting their full amount of money. They're just having it come from a couple of different places. So, that should be celebrated, not stigmatized.
Exactly. So one thing comes to mind when you talked about the USDA, and there's a
Yeah.
website we can go to. Is there any such magical unicorn website that I can go to learn about some of these different programs, or at least understand where they might come from?
The short answer is probably no. There's not a magical
One for
unicorn
everything, yeah.
place for it. But you can do some research, though, like, Google is a very powerful tool, and you can put in some minimal work and find out what some of these different programs are. I mean, if you pick a city that you want to live in and you Google Richfield down payment assistance programs or Anoka down payment assistance programs that are available, they'll come up.
There's going to be a list.
Yeah. Absolutely. But there's not like a one hub that
100% everything.
is going to have 100% everything. Because not every lender has everything, but you can, putting in a little bit of work, you could probably find out what's all in the state.
So if I go to your website, I might find some information about some of them.
Information. Or just give me a call.
Yeah.
And we can have a conversation. We can talk it over. Because it can be confusing, I think, to a lot of people. If you try to process it yourself, it can be really almost overwhelming. So that's why I really encourage people to do it the old-fashioned way and have a conversation with somebody to talk about the programs, to see if they qualify or if your buyer qualifies, and then get an application on the system and really take a hardcore look at it. Because sometimes what happens, you have to be careful. Sometimes lenders, we can inadvertently discourage people too from applying, and we need to be really cognizant of that. Like, oh, you've told me X, Y, and Z. Oh, sorry. Oh, you can't. And then it makes it seem like, oh, they don't want to work with me or I don't qualify. Well, you might not qualify for that particular program, but you might qualify for a different one. So we just want to be careful that we're not discouraging people from applying just because they can't get into one particular program.
The one they called you about.
Correct.
I think too that I don't know that realtors really need to care about this, but when people are doing research on their own and they see those income limits,
Yes.
the income limits are calculated way differently than for a first mortgage. So they're going to try and count every possible little piece of income to make sure you don't exceed the income limits, and we need to do that.
Correct.
People aren't going to be able to do that on their own. It gets tricky with overtime and bonuses and second jobs and seasonal work and all these various things come into that. And for some of these, the charts that they're using for the adjusted gross income is much lower than the 94.6 that Fannie uses all over the country.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So some of these with one person are only 62,000.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we have to be very diligent in figuring that income because that's it'll kick you out if you're not real careful.
And I don't claim to know everything either. So I lean on my underwriting team to be like, hey, here's the file, look it over. You tell me, does this file work? And so we're not finding out after we have a purchase agreement and earnest money has been paid that it doesn't qualify. It's good to do that due diligence on the front end, especially if we're dealing with layering or more complicated, very detailed types of down payment assistance programs. You really want to do that deep dive and confirm all the information that's in the system
Before they go shopping.
because the pre-approval or getting that yes that you qualify is only as good as the information that's in the system.
Right.
And so if the customer either overstated or understated, and that hasn't been physically verified, it can be a radical different outcome as far as that approval.
So doing this sort of work can help alleviate maybe those super high highs and super low lows of this roller coaster journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it can make it a
100%.
little easier of a ride.
And just make the overall experience better for the buyer too, right?
And the realtor and the lender.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yes. We all want a positive experience in the buying process. And part of that is just doing a very thorough and concise job on the front end so that the back end goes nice and smooth.
And that doesn't happen with everyone.
No.
With Kevin and I, always.
Yeah.
But
right.
that's it. It's only like you say, as good as what you put in the computer.
You're right, exactly.
Well, so from a consumer side, there might not be one magical unicorn place. But if they do have a realtor has access to a site called Down Payment Resource.
Right.
That doesn't have 100% of all of every program, but it has a lot of them.
It does, yeah.
So you can do some general searches, but you do need an address because it's it's paired by the address. So
Yeah.
this address is in this location. These are some programs that may be
I think
of.
you have to put your income in there too.
You might be right. You
Yeah.
might have to put your income in there.
Your income as you know it, not how we're going to know it.
Right.
Right.
So there's some resources for realtors. They can help educate clients in various ways, and then partnering with some great lenders like yourself will get kind of everybody on the same playing field, and that's all of our ultimate goal is make that gap smaller, get everybody in a home, right?
Yeah.
So this has been a great talk. I would like to ask if you have one or two bits of information. What should a realtor know? What can they do to help? What should they educate? If there was one thing that you would say.
Get them to us early, I would
Correct.
say.
To us early.
Yeah.
Get them to us early. We don't care if their credit is a little scun up. We're going to do our analysis, say do this, that, and the other thing. We can get a rapid rescore in 3 or 4 days. And, so we want to do that up front. And then if it's not now, it's when, like we talked about the other day.
Yep. We talked about it. In another
Yeah.
video.
So if we can't do it right now, we'll make a plan.
Right. And I would just say to just bring lots of enthusiasm and excitement to the process. Don't always think of it. Remember like how amazing it was maybe when you first bought your house, and to project that as much as possible, because no matter how things go, if realtors and lenders keep it positive and be excited for the buyer as they start this journey, it just makes everything be positive, and just be honest too about the situation. I think that's probably what's helped me in my longevity, is just being positive, enthusiastic, and having fun with the whole journey.
So my last question for you both, because this whole conversation brings to light that really the power is in being able to talk to you, because you're going to help me through a journey. You're going to help answer some questions. You're going to be able to dig a little deeper having that conversation. If I'm a buyer, and a lot of buyers nowadays start everything, all their home searches and everything on the computer,
Yeah.
it likely also includes some sort of financial, what do I qualify for? Let me shop my mortgage online with no person to talk to. From this conversation alone, I would be very scared to find a mortgage all by myself without talking to anybody.
As you should.
As I should.
You should be a little bit
A
afraid.
little bit afraid. And it seems to me that, especially with your vast knowledge of down payment resource and just help in those financing, whether or not I need it, but I could still use it. My hunch is that those online mortgage or just find a mortgage type places aren't really going to suggest that.
They probably won't even have access to it or won't even know about it.
Sure.
Right.
So there's a big difference. And so I think maybe what we should tell realtors is, if you have a client that says, well, I tried and it said no,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. Try again.
try again with a
Try
real
again.
Somebody
person.
local. Somebody.
Right,
local
exactly.
fella, yep.
Being able to, I think there's something powerful about being able to look somebody in the eye and ask your questions and really read their energy and their enthusiasm, and don't settle either. If your loan officer or your realtor is not delivering on service and treating you fairly and how you think you should be treated, fire them. Really, I always say I can be fired at any point in time, right? From a customer standpoint, they don't have to stick with me. I got to earn it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I see customers, they're not getting treated the way that they feel like they should. And I'm like, make the change, because you deserve the best. So keep that in mind. And also encourage buyers to do everything they can to make sure their credit scores are as high as possible, right? Sometimes even if you don't make the most money, if you have a high credit score, that's rich. That opens up doors. Credit scores can open up doors or it can close doors. So encouraging our community to do do everything they can to have as strong of a credit score as possible while still saving money and tucking some money away is going to increase their opportunities.
And if I remember right from our last conversation, Cindy, if I come to you early and then my credit score has some room for improvement,
Yeah,
it's
sometimes
that
can be
whole
very
maybe not
simple.
now, but later. Here's what you can do.
Well, and the other thing I think that we run into is, realtors are a little bit afraid to strongly suggest someone else when someone says, I've been pre-approved.
Sure.
Because you really don't know what that means. It could have been an online lender where they're pre-approved, and that's not going to be a strong pre-approval letter for a multiple offer, that's for sure. But if you can just do something like, wow, that's great that you got all your ducks in a row. We found that, when you work with my team, there's no pressure, but it doesn't hurt to have a conversation about it and see if there's anything else that they can offer, or if you might be more comfortable staying within our group, because things just tend to go smoother.
Yeah, excellent advice.
Because I do think it's really difficult for agents to try and get in there. They want to sell homes and don't want to push, don't want to upset anybody, but it's just a simple, short script of, it just can't hurt to get a second opinion. And I've worked with Cindy for 20 years,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. And if all things being equal, maybe stay local.
Yeah, excellent advice. And we're all on the same page. We just want to get people in houses.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can we do, right? Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both, Kevin and Cindy,
Yeah,
for this
thank you.
conversation. And is there any last thing you want to say before we end the episode?
Well, like we did the other day, Cindy Allen, Bay Equity Home Loans.
All right. Kevin Harris, Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. So
Perfect.
that bow tie guy.
That bow tie guy.
Yeah, everybody. We
Awesome.
were talking about how everyone needs a little thing.
Right, exactly.
At the Good Morning Spar. Come to Good Morning Spar. Get on a committee. It's all good.
Mine's bow ties and Lifesaver mints because, fresh breath is so important.
Love it. Well, thank
Life
you
skills.
both. Thank you both for
Thanks for
coming.
having us.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun.